Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. Third time in Bratislava, and I really love to come here. And it's good times, good academic exchanges as well. So I really like to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about using picture book sequencing in language education and in literature education, I may add. Because I'm a literature professor, and when I teach literature, I often want to do it rather hands-on. So instead of just talking about things like plot and character and things like that, I want the students also to do plot, character, and things like that. So what I have been doing is to use, for a long time, I have been using single picture prompts. I think I might even have been here 4 years ago to talk about maps. No? Yes? And so I used maps, and I was reminded of the maps here also when we looked at Professor Schubertova's presentation here, how maps can be used also as a departure for creative writing. And I've also used, for instance, the material, the Harris Burdick Mysteries, which many of you probably are familiar with, where you use single picture prompts to write stories. But what I wanted to do was to develop this further. How can we go about using sequences, pictures for that purpose? Because if you have a sequence, you actually also highlight the plot, for instance, very much, and you can see maybe also, and setting becomes very important. So this was something that I struggled with, and one of the things that I did was to use, of course, wordless picture books. We've already seen some brilliant examples of that here today. But it also struck me that one can also actually use books that have been published and you simply take out the pictures, especially if those books are not very familiar to those who are working with them. This will be a new challenge. So this is what I'm going to present today. And what I have used is Igor Oleynikov. So I'm a big fan of his work, and I used 2 works of his, which came out in 2016 and 2015, I think. So they're really recent. I've only seen them in Russian, and I had to talk to Russian friends to ask what are they about. So the first one is actually a story by Pushkin, but it's a Russian version of Snow White. Okay? So when you see the pictures, you get the vibes. You get that this is a fairy tale, and most people also see, it's Snow White. But then they get in trouble because it doesn't really fit their expectations of Snow White. So we'll have a brief look at that, but it will not be my main focus today. The second, I'm not going to tell you a lot about that, but it's called in translation, The Book of Judges. And it is a brilliant work, I think, too, and it also has a very sort of northern Russian setting, which is interesting, I think. Okay, so, and here's one picture from the Book of Judges. So what I did with the students was that I used, like I always do, I use first a single picture prompt. I could have used the other one that I just showed you, but I actually used this one. Gave them this picture and said, okay, can you describe the picture? Just describe it. And so they, of course, come up with, okay, we have 9 birds, maybe 9 crows, ravens perhaps. They're descending, and this one has something in its beak, and it doesn't look, oops, sorry. Gosh, okay. Everything to create some kind of drama here. So here, this is red. This is red. And it's probably not ketchup. Okay? And then, of course, you have this very mysterious thing coming up in the middle here, which is hard to... Some students interpreted it as whirlwind. Others like that it's a pole or something like that. One can, of course, also talk about the perspective here, that it's like very much someone, almost lying on the ground and seeing this very close up. So it's a very interesting picture in itself. Rather simple, but still very interesting. Oh, I should also make one little addition here. We're talking children's books, of course, at this conference. This is aimed at upper secondary school and to teacher students. This can be applied to, of course, the methodology can be applied on much kinder texts and illustrations than the ones I'm going to show you here. They're pretty cruel and adult in a sense. So this is geared towards upper secondary students and my own teacher students. But the methodology can definitely be used with other materials. Okay, so even just based on this, I used this in a school in Lund, and the two of the titles that they came up with, because besides the description, they should also come up with a caption. That is, a text that is precisely the moment of the picture. Like in mostly old-fashioned picture books, you have a caption. And a possible title of a story. So that's the first challenge. And they came up with these Crow-copocalypse now, with a reference to Apocalypse Now, and A Murder of Crows, which I thought were two very, interesting, thought-provoking titles. I liked it. That's why I've given this talk this as well. Okay, so that was the warm-up. But then we turn to, I'll just show you these pictures. This is actually from the Snow White story. And I'm just showing you this picture because just based on this picture, it is hard to say what kind of story it is. You need more pictures. And this one is also difficult. You can see these idols here, perhaps, where do we have our speleologist here in the audience? But also, of course, the glass coffin. This was very difficult for many students to even see what this is and to make the association with. And the point isn't that they should realize that this is Snow White. That's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to sit in groups and work out a story based on the pictures. So there's no right or wrong here. But of course, the logic of the fairy tale and the logic of people's frames of references will steer most people in that direction. It makes it easier, actually, also. And of course, this is not it's not an extreme aesthetics either, so it makes it easier for interpretation. These are some of the other pictures. And the giveaway for most is probably this picture where you have the red apple and with the girl, and also here with when the witch is coming with the apples here. But for instance, this technique here that Oleynikov is using, almost like in a comic strip, it's only two people actually. They couldn't make heads, or some could not make heads or tails out of that. Also, of course, the fact that the 7 little dwarfs are huge Bogatyrs also made it very difficult. They couldn't say, how can this be Snow White? You have these giant men here suddenly. But, it's the same basic story. Anyway, so this was the exercise, and I think it dawned on all who did this exercise that the expectations of the fairy tale made it quite simple to come up with a tale, even if they said that, but this picture doesn't really fit, because they got the pictures in random order, and they had to negotiate, okay, which one comes first, which one comes next. So they negotiated the plot structure, the epic structure of the story, and then they presented the story. And in my mind, the framework of the fairy tale, and even a known fairy tale, made that quite simple, I think. Okay, then we came to the next one, Book of Judges. And here, I'm just going to read through this, and then I'm going to hand out the material. So, you can see here that we have a lot of things. There are 18 pictures. And the students were asked to look at these pictures. And I said, well, one overall thing, even before you decide the structure of the plot, think, where is this? When is it? Where and when is it? Is it in a realistic, is it in this world? Is it fantasy world? Where is it? And then order the pictures in such a way that the sequence will make narrative sense. And this was really astonishing to see, because in some cases, the groups worked this out very quickly. In others, they struggled and negotiated, and it took hours. And then they had to go home and sort of find new time to work on this. Then we did what I've always done before, the writing of captions. So it was a group of 4. You would have, responsibility for a couple of pictures where they wrote a caption, that little segment of text should exist within the final story. So it's kind of building the story with the help of pictures, then the help of agreeing on setting, with the help of writing these captions, and also coming up later on with the title. Naming. If you're writing in a group, you need to agree on the names. And the names are important because the names signal also setting, genre, and things like that. Places, the same thing. So decide on style and genre features. And establish how the story should be narrated, point of view. Is it a third-person narration? Is it a first-person narration? What is it? Yeah. All right. I'll just now, before I hand out, I'll just show you the pictures quickly. So here and they are not in order now. They're not in order. So these are 3 pictures, and they are on separate pages in the original work, okay? And again, there's a dash of color here. Otherwise, it's in grayscale. And this one, these 2 you've seen before. Okay, we can back up here. So I have so I'll let you form groups. I think I only have 4 sets. But here's one set, and you get the luxurious deluxe plastic version. And here you have a little bit simpler. Maybe we should, I don't know how many groups we have. Maybe we can do it here. And you can, I'm running out of it here, so anyone here? You have a group here? And you can just look and share with each other a little bit. So the pictures, if you can find a narrative order to them, we'll have a couple of minutes to do this, and then we'll see what you have to say, how you would solve it. Oh, I should say one more thing. I think there are 14 pictures or something in this. So I also told them that they could choose to take out 3 of the pictures and not use them at all, because these are very many. And of course, one of the discussion points that I would also be interested in hearing from you is, should a picture sequence like this have fewer pictures, perhaps? I'm going to experiment with this myself later on. Okay, I know I've given you far too little time to do this properly, but just to give you a taste of, and you're also, the groups are a bit too large for this, and we have no tables, and etc. But on the other hand, you are professionals, so I know you can handle this. So anyway, I'm going to go around and just to hear with each group if there are any comments on the main challenges, or just comments, or which picture you started with and things like that. So I'll go down to the group the furthest away, and while I do that, please, maybe you want to sit like this to be able to see each other. I don't know. I will do that anyway. All right, so we have the group at the back, and they are eager to continue. So I have a spokesperson here. Hello. Can you give the mic to her? And you can speak in Slovak or English, of course. Okay. So you can, any comments? And if it's in Slovak,
let's start with the comments, probably.
And the rest of you, please listen.
Okay, actually it's quite difficult to identify a picture to start with.
Yes.
So we have identified one. We have decided that we will start with a man, with this man.
Okay, I'll hold it
with
up.
This man, and
it's the man who is
talking to the other persons, and he's telling them and inviting them to come to find something. He's telling the other persons there is something somewhere happening, and he's pushing them and inviting them to go there. And so the place. And then we have the movement. Then we have the movement to a mystic place. And here the groups of people are moving to the place. And then there was a fight. We don't have a proper order of the pictures yet.
Of course.
But then we were, for example, the points to decide. We have an old man on this picture.
Yes.
And then there is a man here, which is the one here is a bit
sled.
hidden. Yeah. And we were wondering whether this is the old man or whether it's the young man. For example, this one, yeah. So it was even difficult for us to decide who is the person that died in the story, and
yeah. Okay, I know you have more to say, but I think I'll just go on to the next group and see what they have to say here. Thank you very much. Okay, so anyone who wants to be a spokesperson here? I know you have been very active here in this group, so who wants to speak? Anyone? Yeah? Let's hear.
Takže zomrel človek kdesi na Sibírii. Bol to severská krajina. Bol to proste významný človek. Bol to kráľ, bol to vodca. Jeho syn sa vybral po jeho stopách, išiel ho hľadať. Prišiel na miesto, ako kde ho našiel, v podstate krv ho tam navidkovala. Najskôr si myslel, že ho zabil vlk. Potom zistil, že je to medveď. Typoval, hej. Nakoniec proste sa tam, on stále putoval, až prišiel na miesto, kde videl tie krkavce, alebo vrany, alebo nejaké také vtáky, ktoré už proste krúžili nad telom toho mŕtvého, tak ho vlastne našiel. Potom proste zistil, že zomrel v boji. Postaral sa o jeho telo, zdal mu akože uctil si ho, zdal mu znak úcty. Pretože to bol hrdina, tak ho viedol, akože dal ho do saní a akože zdal mu tú poctu, že ho zobral medzi jeho ľudí. Vidíme stopy, ako ho ťahal. Prišiel na miesto, toho človeka pochovali a on sa miesto neho stal vodcom. Ďalší obrázok sme už nemali.
Okay, I can see that you arranged the pictures with the old man in the beginning and at the end, right? So is it a kind of him thinking back? Is that the way you have done the plot? That an old man and then he's thinking back on an earlier episode in his life? No? No, okay. No, but you still have him as framing the story.
She's the director.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have to know. It was, but I just noticed that you had that framing. All right. We'll go to the next group. Okay. All right. Let's hear what. Who wants to speak here? Anyone? You want to do it?
My sme tam videli asi 5 rôznych odohrávajúcich sa príbehov a nevedeli sme tam nejako zladiť.
Different stories and we couldn't come
Okay. That can also happen. Yes. Yeah. So you start here with the house that is, or the smoke coming up of the stones. What is that? Is it the house or
Nie, to je miesto tragédie. Kde sa stalo niečo zlé, to je miesto tragédie. Objavilo sa tam divé zviera, ktoré tam našlo krvavé stopy. Potom ho začal niekto stopovať. Ale tu sme sa zamotali, lebo sme tam niečo ešte vybrali. Chceli sme to ešte presunúť zase na začiatok. Hej. Áno. Potom sme tu mali ďalší príbeh, ako nejaký vodca chcel vyriešiť problém celého národa. Chceli asi tiež riešiť zrejme to, že ich niekto napadol. Áno, že hľadajú. Potom tam bol aj príbeh pomsty, sme tu našli.
Yes.
Ale nevedeli sme sa dohodnúť na nejakom spoločnom.
Thank you very much. I'll go on. This is, I think, very typical. Stories of revenge. Exactly. And we come to the final group up here who wants to talk about the way you solved it here, or what you thought. Anyone? Do you want to take it, Marketa? No? Timmy? No? Don't be shy. Zore, yes.
Different views, point of views of the group, but I think the story starts with maybe this picture that shows something bad happening. Then we can see more things that, for example, that man just show some tracks.
Yes.
Blood from
of the blood that maybe one of the crows have been carrying the flesh.
Yes, and then again, if we want to follow blood, we can see here, and maybe this picture that comes, and he or she announced something bad happened, and this man is related to the dead person. He just gets the bad news, something like this. If anybody wants to continue or add something.
Thank you very much. I think I need to go on, but this, of course, you can see that one can have a very long, fruitful discussion on this, and that also in some groups you will have consensus. In some groups, I had groups where there was one young woman in one group, and she had such a strong idea, and she said that, I know what this story should be like, and don't want. So okay, I said, you write your story. You know, in that case, you know, better that than you kind of the whole group is destroyed. And so you know, you can generate, of course, an enormous number of stories from this. Anyway, so the what came out here, I heard the word revenge. It's clearly a topic, a theme here could be revenge. I also, in one of the, I think the second group here, we came upon this, that it's possible that some of the old person here is also the young person in one of the other pictures. And this was also something that many of the students in my groups have thought about, that possibility, because it also reduces the number of characters. In fairy tales, you often have very few characters. Here, you have a myriad of characters, but you can actually reduce it quite consistently if you think of it as taking place in a now and in a past, where all of the characters have a younger self and an older self. And then you create a frame story, which is, of course, also incredibly interesting from a narrative point of view, that you start thinking about what is a frame story, what is a flashback, things like that. So I thought this was something I had never been able to generate with just one picture prompt, but which came up naturally when working on this. And of course, I didn't go into literary theory. I just used the basic concepts again and again. And I think this is worth doing, actually, because to have an awareness of setting, plot, narration, things like this. And it comes up naturally when you work with pieces like this, because then you have to solve it. In a group, you're a little bit smarter than when you're on your own, usually. So I think it works well. Here is one version from a story that was called Relived, which actually did exactly what you were talking about there. This is from one of the student essays. Break of dawn, again. It was freezing in the old man's hut because the fire had died out during the night. Only the smoke remained. Despite the cold, Kumya woke up sweaty. Always the same dream. Every morning he wished it was just a dream, but he knew all too well that it wasn't. The images were as clear in his head as when it happened. And then you go back in time and you have the hunter, the young hunter who comes upon his beloved or his daughter, I forget, who has been taken by a rival tribe, and you know the whole conflict then that emerges between two different tribes. So it can be solved that way. And here are two of the presentations, just the first slide, because I made them do also, make them do a lot of things. So they write the story, but I also said, well, you can't just read the story, you have to make a nice presentation. So they made slide presentations, and then they told the story and how they had worked with it. So this one called it The Tragedy of Bloody Falls, and another one was called, here, The Spirit War in Naklin. So the interesting thing was that so many of them used the revenge theme, and so many used the tribal setting. Some of them used, but it was often very realistic. And they often made use of a lot of flashbacks and things like that, which was fine. But then, of course, this can then lead on to another discussion, namely, where did I take these pictures? They are from an illustrated version, and I know, I forget your name now, but you told me, is this Judith, you said, and none of my students spotted that this was actually an illustrated version of the Book of Judges from the Bible. So actually, it's an interesting, you can then, if you want to, you can have a really interesting discussion. The Book of Judges is not one of the books that you read like regularly. And it's a story about a tribe who has its ups and downs. Sometimes they follow God and then they have success, and then they don't, and then they are almost annihilated by their rival tribes. What Oleynikov has done here is simply that he has moved it to Siberia or Lapland or a northern climate, and suddenly all of these religious connotations are gone. There is, and it makes us see also those stories in a new light. So one can take it in that direction if one wants to. And one can say that, okay, so what is the Book of Judges? It's a story about revenge and about tribes fighting. Yes, that's right. But of course, it's also about a religious strong, of course, a religious work as well. And in some of the stories, this one, you have the spirit war. They actually include a spirit dimension, but they don't. It's not a Judeo-Christian God, but they sense that this is also about rituals and about spirits and things like that. Many of them use the polar bear and the ravens as spirit animals, so that people who could change into polar bears or change into birds. So there was the bird clan and the polar bear clan and so on. So these were some of the things that came out of this. And I should just in conclusion say that it's been very rewarding. I'm still finding the form. Maybe I'm using too many pictures and so on, but I think it's very interesting to use the picture book sequence. I think it's interesting to use to repurpose illustrations that have been used in another context, because these illustrations can be used for creating any number of new stories. But then you can actually take it back and say, okay, but what does that say about the context for which they were written or made in the first place? And so we can have an interesting discussion about literary context as well, if we want to. Okay, and this is pretty advanced, but as I said before, you can also use, of course, other kinds of illustrations for this kind of pedagogy. In conclusion, I would also just like to say that this is now going to be published in a book called Challenging Picture Books in Education, I think Routledge, coming out next year. And Bettina Kümmerling-Maybauer is the editor of the book, so it's one of the chapters of that, if you want to see more detail about how this was carried out. I also want to ask you if I can, because this project has also been sponsored by EU money. It's a Erasmus Plus Fantails project, and I just realized that if I can put your names because there's an outreach dimension to it. So if I can, I have talked about this in Sweden, and then I put up the names to those teachers who have spoken to, and that gives us a little bit more money. And if I can use, for instance, the list of names that you have here for this conference, or for us who are here, that would also generate some funding for us. But if someone does not want to be included on that list, can you just please tell me? In that case, I will of course not quote you on that. But it would be helpful from an administrative point of view. Okay, I hope you have had fun with this, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.